You join me at Brighton Station, where a crowd of very official people have gathered behind me for the official unveiling of the first train to be kitted out in the new Great British Railways livery. Welcome to Network News.
This story is just the latest development in an ongoing effort to introduce drastic reforms to Britain's rail network by bringing passenger rail operators back under government ownership through a new organisation called Great British Railways. In order to avoid the expense of terminating contracts early, this is being achieved by taking over train operating companies as their contracts were set to expire anyway, enabled by a new piece of legislation known as the Passenger Railway Services Public Ownership Act. 4 operators had been taken over already for breach of contract, but this legislation meant that the gradual takeover of remaining operators as contracts expire could commence, with South Western Railway becoming the first and West Midlands Trains being the most recent. Today's event is partially in anticipation of the next operator being taken over though.
The unveiling of this livery comes ahead of the nationalisation of Govia Thameslink Railway on the 31st of May. And whilst for now it's only on this train, the plan is that eventually this livery will be gradually rolled out across the entire GBR fleet until pretty much every train in the country looks like this.
The livery itself is inspired by the Union Jack and has been designed to, quote, create a sense of motion and direction that reflects a railway moving confidently into the future. Some initial renderings of it had already been released online, but the real thing includes additional elements not included in those renderings, such as a yellow bar to clearly mark where the first class section is alongside some markings on the doors, as well as similar markings in place to identify the train's onboard wheelchair space.
There's been a lot of discussion about the merits of this livery online, but whatever your thoughts on it, whether you like it, whether you don't, I have to say, seeing it in person, it does look better in person than in the sort of government renders we've been provided of it so far.
The Secretary of State for Transport, Heidi Alexander, made the trip to Brighton to attend the unveiling ceremony. Sadly, I wasn't able to get an interview with her on the day, but in a government press release, she said, "The unveiling of the first GBR branded train in Brighton today makes the future of Britain's railways a reality. It represents all of the work being done by staff up and down the country to fundamentally reform our railway. This isn't just a paint job, it's an important step towards building a more joined up, publicly owned railway that puts passengers first, delivers better services and leaves the frustrations and fragmentations of the past behind."
The interior of these trains remains largely unchanged. You can see this is a former Great Western unit, even though it's now in use with Southern. Presumably it will be changed to a sort of GBR identity eventually, but I imagine that's not as much of a priority for them as the sort of exterior livery.
Interestingly, the exterior livery isn't just branded as Great British Railways, but also specifies that this is from the Southern region, which suggests that even though this will become the standard livery across all trains in the country, they are at least making some effort to retain regional identities.
So what's next for GBR? Well, currently going through Parliament is the Railways Bill, which is the legislation to take all the nationalised railway operators, which are still technically separate companies for now, and merge them all into one massive operator called Great British Railways, which will be responsible not only for operating the day-to-day trains, but will also take on Network Rail's responsibility for maintaining tracks and things like that.
The justification behind it is twofold. Firstly, it allows the government to save money by no longer paying management fees to private companies to run the services on their behalf, and secondly, it allows the railway to operate more efficiently as a single organisation, unlike today where multiple different operators may have overlaps in responsibilities or conflicts of interest owing to them functioning as separate organisations.
GBR will also take on the Office of Rail and Roads' current responsibilities for deciding track access rights, so it really will become an overarching organisation controlling pretty much all aspects of the railway operation in Britain.
This has prompted criticism from some groups, notably the freight sector and First Group, who have concerns that their services could be forced off the network in favour of GBR's trains, even in spite of a statutory duty to promote freight and a legal obligation to be non-discriminatory in its assessment of open access applications. The forthcoming takeover of Govia Thameslink Railway will be a particularly big milestone for GBR, as it's one of the largest franchises, responsible for around 18% of all passenger rail journeys in the UK, operating under the sub-brands of Southern, Thameslink, Gatwick Express and Great Northern. Its takeover means that 8 in 10 journeys made on operators that will eventually fall under GBR's remit are now operated in public hands.
As well as aligning with the takeover of Govia Thameslink Railway, the unveiling of this livery also aligns with the 1-year anniversary of the nationalisation of South Western Railway, which was the first operator to be taken over under the government's plans to establish Great British Railways.
Following on from GTR's takeover on the 31st, the next operators to be taken over will be Chiltern Railways on the 20th of September and Great Western Railway on the 13th of December, before all remaining operators are taken over by the end of 2027. But that's for the future, and as today's demonstrator train pulls out of the station, I'm left reflecting on how it's provided a brief glimpse at what that future could look like. But what do you think? Are you excited for the future of Britain's railways under their new management structure, or are you not a fan of every train having the same design? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe to Network News for more updates like this, and until next time, thanks for watching.